Hi everyone, welcome to Empty Nest Creations. Today is another exciting day. I've got Sonnet's Makers box for October. So we're going to go ahead and open this up. So let's dive into what's in our box this month. So first thing are these beautiful little ornaments, wood cutouts. There's a snowflake, a little light bulb, and ornament. So we'll come up with something to do with those. Then we've got this beautiful napkin. It says Merry Christmas. I love the wreath and the berries. Then we have a milk paint. This is Sweet Pickins milk paint in the color Red Wagon. I've already used this before and I love this color. It's a great Christmas color. Then we have some Connie lines and design papers. So we've got this one here. Again, we've got some holly leaves and berries. A beautiful stocking. I love that it's on music. Both pages have a music background this time. So here's the other one. This is the one with 3 different prints on it. So you get this size, which I believe is pretty close to a 5x7, and then these are closer to a 3x5. I love the candy canes. These go really well together. So we'll find something fun to do with those. Then we have this beautiful recycled paper, which is a plaid. Beautiful Christmas plaid this time. I love that. And then we have this one. And let me see what these are called. So this plaid is called Festive Fireside Plaid. And then this one is called Yuletide Whispers. And so let's see what we've got here. I love the vintage pictures here. We've got the children around the tree, Santa and his sleigh. And then we have this picture down here, the children playing with the dollhouse and the fishing pole. Love these. Some beautiful script on here. We've got December, season's greetings. And then on this side, we've got Christmas Carol with the bell. Another vintage child with the Christmas tree. Here's some more children, and then some more bells. So this will be fun to work with, and all of these papers go so well together. So these will, and this one even has some of the plaid. See that? Nice. These are going to be really fun to work with. Okay, let's get into the other paints. So you always get 2 DIY paints and you get 2 fusion paint. So the DIY paint colors this time are Cardinal Red and Salty Kiss. So these are beautiful red and greens. They go really well with Connie's papers. I believe that she uses the DIY paints to paint these pictures. And then in the fusion paint, we have Fort York Red and Manor Green. And I have used this one already a lot this season. On some of my crafts, I have one of these. So I'm glad that this one was in here because I love this color for Christmas. So that's what's in our box this month. And I think this time I'm going to try to create a vignette. So I'm going to create something that can all go together in one display. So let me grab some thrifted finds and we'll get started on these projects. So for project 1, I'll be working on a wooden door hanger sign. I picked this up at the thrift store. It had a ribbon painted on the front, and I just used some sandpaper and sanded that off and gave that center a good base paint of white paint. I'm coming in with DIY's paint and Salty Kiss. This is a beautiful green color, and I'm going to give the frame one coat of this paint. This is a clay-based paint that is highly pigmented, and so it covers really, really well. With DIY paint, you can use a heat tool to dry it, and it does dry a little bit lighter than it looks when it's wet. So that's something important to keep in mind. I'm just going to touch up any spots that need it, and then we're going to get on with our decoupage. So I'm using the Festive Fireside Plaid that came in the maker's box, and I just used my fingernail to go around the edges and kind of score it so I would know where to tear my paper. And I'm just going to use the wet tear method here, just using a paintbrush with some water and going around that edge and just tearing it off. Now I'm going to mist that paper and then kind of fit it in the middle, make sure it fits really well, smooth it out a little bit. Then I'm going to use the DIY's liquid patina. And I'm just starting with that starter strip, laying that down and then smoothing out that paper. Then I'm going to lift it up, and I want to make sure that I have that wet edge where I can see where I put that liquid patina down. That just makes sure that you don't end up with a big clump of patina in there, or that you don't miss a spot and have a spot in the middle of your project that's not adhered. So once I have it all laid down, I'm going to give it a good coat of liquid patina and let that dry. Now I'm using a transfer from Partridge Lane. This is an IOD transfer, and I'm just going to add this to this piece. Now I do sell IOD products on my website. If you're interested in purchasing any of these products, you can find them at emptynestcreation.com. These transfers are very detailed, and they match really well with all the products that came in this box this time. I plan to use this as a tray or as just a background for a display instead of a wall hanger. So I did take that hanger off the back. Now I'm coming in with just some antique wax. This is the Waverly Antique Wax, and I'm going to give that frame a coat of this antique wax. The color when it was dry was a little lighter than I wanted it to be, so this will just darken that up a little bit and give that frame a little bit of age. I thought that green when it dried was just a little too pastel-y, so this will darken it up some. And I also went around the edges on the inside of that paper just to make sure that there's, no white showing from that painted background. And then once we get all this buffed out, this project will be complete. So here it is. This is, I can see this on my hutch, just leaning against the back of the hutch with some things displayed in front of it. It would look really good with my milk glass collection. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this project. I think it turned out really nice. You could also use this as a tray. Here I have it just laying down with some things on it. Either way, I think this would be a beautiful addition to your holiday decor. It adds a nice pop of color, and it's a good size. With that, we're going to move on to project number 2. For this project, I picked up this picture frame at the thrift store, and it had a bow on it, and I'm just using my heat tool to soften that glue and get that off. Now this is a MDF board, so I took it outside and gave it a spray paint coat of white paint, and I'm going to be using the Sweet Pickins milk paint in the color Red Wagon. And with this milk paint, you mix equal parts water to powder, and they suggest that you put the water in first. This really does help cut down on the clumps that you would get in this paint. And then you want to mix it really, really well and let it sit for about 10 minutes to thicken up. So you can see here it's thickened up some. And I'm going to give this frame 2 coats of this. Now, like I said, it's MDF frame. That's why I took it out and I spray painted those edges, because when they get wet, MDF will swell up, and I didn't want it to distort those edges when I painted it. So I took it out and gave it a good coat of spray paint. Plus, this is going to crack, and I wanted that white to show through when it cracks. And boy, did I get some cracks on this one. I love the way this crackled here. So I'm coming back in with that second coat. The first coat always looks really terrible. It's just really thin and spotty, but once you come back in with that second coat, look how good that covers. The milk paint is finicky. It has a mind of its own, so you kind of have to decide ahead of time that you're going to go with the flow. Whatever it does is what it does. But this turned out really perfect. I wanted that aged crackle look, and I was not disappointed. So I'm going to come in with some transfers. This is from the Santa's Hollow. And I'm going to use some of this holly and berries, and I'm going to use a Saint Nick here. And then I'm also going to use some wording later on here. So I had cut this too short, so I can just add that little piece back on there. I just laid it down and transferred it on, and then transferring the rest of that down. And once you peel that top plastic sheet off, you want to make sure that you burnish it down. You can do that with the carrier sheet, or you can just use your fingers, but you want to make sure that it's adhered really well to your piece and that there's no air bubbles. So here I'm coming back in for the top with just the word Christmas Joys and some more holly and berries. I'm going to add those. And then milk paint does need to be sealed in, and your transfers need to be sealed as well. So I'm going to come back in with just some DIY's liquid patina here, and I'm going to give the entire piece a good coat of liquid patina. This is going to seal in that paint and seal in those transfers and make this a piece that will be durable and will last for many years. I kind of envision this being used to hold your children's Santa pictures. So every year when they go to get their picture made, you can just swap out that picture and use this frame every year to display those Santa pictures. Or a family Christmas picture. You know, we try, we don't always, but we try to get a group picture every year, and that would be a nice thing to display in this as well. I love the way this turned out. I love the vintage look of it. I love the crackle, and that you can see all of that white coming through that crackle. So I just used a piece of the Roycycled Yuletide, what's it called? Yuletide Whispers. I cut out the Santa's sleigh there and just stuck that in the frame for now. But I think this turned out beautiful. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this one. Look at that crackle. Looks so nice. I love it. Now let's move on to project number 3. So for this project, I found this little cutting board. It's MDF with a just a thin layer of wood on the top, and they had put some vinyl letters on here and then put some sort of clear coat over it. I took it out and sanded it some, but I didn't want to sand that veneer completely off. So you'll see here that those letters are where they were. It's just popping back through. But we're gonna fix that. So I'm gonna give the front and the back of this piece 2 coats of, this is the Fusion paint in the color Manor Green. And then I'm going to use the Woodland Stocking by the Painted Photographer. And again, I'm going to use that wet tear method. Now for these rice papers, it works better to wet the back. The ink on the front sometimes will keep that water from penetrating into the paper. So I'm just kind of holding it up so I can see where the image is and just outlining it with the water. And then look how easy this just tears. It tears so easily. Now because I'm going to put this on that green painted surface, I am going to add some white paint to the back, and I'm just using some DIY paint in the color Beadboard here. And I'm just going to paint the entire back of this piece, and then I'm going to use my heat tool to dry it. You want it to be good and dry before you move on to decoupage. Now I'm going to use liquid patina here again, and normally when I'm decoupaging I would mist my paper, but because this has that DIY paint on the back, I'm not going to wet it. Water reactivates that paint, and I don't want to smear white paint all over my green board. So I'm just going to fold this back, put down a coat of that liquid patina, and then lay this down in there. Now you do still want to be careful because that liquid patina can reactivate that paint as well. So I'm going to brush over this, but I'm going to be really careful to not overwork it so that that paint doesn't kind of ooze out from the back. So I'm going to go ahead and finish decoupaging this entire piece down, and then I'm going to cover the entire front of this board with the liquid patina so that the sheen is the same over the entire piece. And then we're going to do something for that back where those words were just shining through. And I somehow failed to turn my camera on for the next part. But I used Roy Cycles decoupage paper and Yuletide Whispers. And I decoupaged this on the back. Now, for this one, I did not paint the back of the paper or the surface white. I just left it that dark green. It gives it a little bit of a different finish. It gives it more of a rustic look, I think. And so I just left it that dark green underneath. And once it was completely dry, I'm coming in with that sandpaper, sanding in a downward motion to tear off all of that excess paper. This just gives you a really nice, smooth, finished edge. And I use my scissors to cut into those curves. That just helps you to get in there with that sandpaper and not tear the paper in the process. So once I get all of this excess paper off, this project will be complete. And I thought this would be a beautiful addition to a kitchen during the holidays. You can display it in either direction. It would be really cute sitting in a window so you could see the back from the outside and the front from the inside. I love that that stocking goes so well with that vintage rolling pin. Those red handles on that rolling pin and the stocking, they just match really, really well. So let me know in the comments below what you think about this project. Have you ever used the Painted Photographer's rice papers? And if you have, what do you think about them? I really love her paintings. I love her painting style. I don't think I've seen any of her papers that I don't like. And then on the back, we have that recycled paper. I wanted to make sure that I got that word December on there. And then I wanted this vintage image of these children around that tree. That just brings back so many memories from my childhood. It reminds me of the books that we used to read, like the Dick and Jane books. Those pictures is what that reminds me of. But I love the way this one turned out. And that paper covered up all of those words. You can't see any of that anymore. So it turned out really, really well. And with that, we're going to move on to our final project for today. Project number 4. Now this is a candy jar that I picked up at the thrift store. It had this wood topper on it. And so I'm going to use some Bonding Boss by Dixie Belle. And I failed to get this on camera. I don't know what happened, but I just used a pouncer and pounced that all over that glass. This is a primer, and when you're painting on glass, you just want to make sure that your paint is going to stick to the glass really well. So I primed it and let that dry completely. Now, I didn't really need to prime this lid. I was kind of thinking about using milk paint on it. That's why I primed it. But I chose to go a different route. So I didn't really need to do this, but a little primer never hurts anything. So once I get all that painted, I'm going to let it dry completely. And then we're going to come back in and we're going to paint that top and that candy jar. So I'm going to use the DIY's Cardinal Red paint here. And I'm going to give this lid 2 coats of this paint. And I'm going to paint the entire lid. And I am going to turn it over and paint the edge underneath. I don't want to mess with the seal at all. And on the jar, I'm leaving that top rim unpainted so that this will still be food safe. You can still put candy in here, or you could put cookies in here, whatever you wanted, and it would still, that seal's going to help to keep it fresh. But I wanted it to make sure that it was still food safe. So here I'm just going in and very carefully painting that wood edge, trying not to get any on that seal. Now DIY paint needs to be sealed. So I'm going to go back in with the DIY's liquid patina, and I always have to pry my lids off. I try to wipe down the edge when I finish before I put the lid back on, but they always stick. So I'm going to give that a good coat of that and let that dry. Now for the jar, I'm going to use Fusion paint in the color Chateau. This is a nice, creamy, off-white color. And I'm going to give the entire outside of this jar 2 coats. Now again, I'm not going to paint that top edge. And I don't paint the bottom because I don't think no matter what you do, the bottom, if it's painted, the paint's going to scratch off. And so I just left it the glass color. And I gave this 2 good coats. And once I finished, I went around and I cleaned off that edge. I want to make sure that there's no paint on that edge. I wanted it to look nice and neat. So I'm just going around and cleaning that off. Now for this one, we're going to use the Peppermint Wishes by the Painted Photographer. And we're going to use the 2 smaller images. And I'm going to use that wet tear method again. I want these to kind of look like the label on a candy jar. So I'm just going around and tearing the edges off. I don't want those white lines. And you could cut this with scissors or a paper cutter if you wanted. I just like that softer edge that you get when you tear it. So I'm going to go around and tear the edges off both of these papers. Now, peppermint candy and candy jars reminds me of my grandmother. Every year at the holidays, Grandma would have her little candy jar out with those soft peppermint sticks in them. Those things are like magical. I can eat a piece of that candy and it just takes me right back to being a child. So that's why I put the peppermint sticks on this one, because it makes me think of my grandma. We buy that, I think it's Tom's that makes those peppermint sticks, and we try to find them every year. And we all have one to remind us of Grandma. It's not Christmas without that peppermint candy. So now that I've got those edges torn off, we're going to use some DIY liquid patina. I always miss the back of that paper. Just helps it to lay really flat and smooth on there. And then I put a starter strip down and then just decoupage the rest of it down. Now going over the top to make sure it's all sealed in. Now I'm going to do the one on the back as well. And then I'll just go back over the top of both of them to make sure that they're good and sealed in. I'm going to let this dry. And then this project is complete. I really, really like this one. I do resell most of my projects in my retail booth at Main Street Vintage Market in Millbrook, Alabama. But I may keep this one. So let me know what you think about these projects. I really appreciate all of your comments. I've been reading all of them and I try to respond to all of them. I love your input. So keep it coming. And again, if you are not subscribed, I would love for you to subscribe and join me on my journey. And I really appreciate you giving me some of your time. I know that our time is very short, limited, so I'll see you in the next video.